it's a great honour to be here today at this fabulous symposium, and of course in Glastonbury, one of the main spiritual centres of Britain. And it's really good to be here. So that was a nice intro from Sarita, and unlike Carrie, my slides have absolutely no relevance really about what I'm talking about apart from Hecate. I've simply collated a load from the internet to let you have something nice to look at while I talk. But it is interesting because I did trawl through the internet with lots of different keywords and found there was a limited selection of images, but these are the images that have been put there by people today that are fans of Hecate. So there's actually very few classical ones really. There's many images of women as Hecate, many images of her like a triple mother, more of which I'll say later. So it's just something to look at on a slideshow. But anyway, talking about Hecate, she has quite mysterious origins. People say all sorts of things about her and who she is, but nothing is entirely definitive. Some say she was a titan that helped the elder gods. Some say she's the daughter of the star goddess, the aunt of Apollo and Artemis. She's the tender-hearted seeker of Persephone. She helped Demeter. And you wonder about this lovely, tender-hearted goddess helping somebody seek their lost daughter. How could she become somebody only associated with curses, evil-doing, and strong dark magics? In Theogony by Hesiod, he says, Hecate, whom Zeus, the son of Cronos, honoured above all. He gave her splendid gifts to have a share of the earth and the unfruitful sea. She received honour also in starry heaven, and is honoured exceedingly by the deathless gods. For to this day, whenever any of one of men on earth offers rich sacrifices and prayers for favour according to custom, he calls upon Hecate. Great honour comes full easily to him whose prayers to the goddess receives favourably, and she bestows wealth upon him, for the power surely is with her. For as many as were born of earth and ocean amongst all those she has her due. Whom she will, she greatly aids and advances. She sits before worshipful kings in judgment, and in the assembly whom she will is distinguished among the peoples. And when men arm themselves for the battles that destroy men, then the goddess is at hand to give victory and grant glory readily to whom she will. Good is she also when men contend at the games, for thereto the goddess is with them and profits them. And he who by might and strength gets the victory wins the rich prize easily with joy and brings glory to his parents. And she is good to stand by horsemen whom she will, and to those whose business is the grey discomfortable sea, and who pray to Hecate and the loud crashing earth shaker. Easily the glorious goddess gives great catch, and easily she takes it away as soon as seen, if so she will. She is good in the byre with Hermes to increase the stock, the droves of kine and wide herds of goats and flocks and fleecy sheep. If she will, she increases from a few and makes them many. So then, albeit her mother's only child, she is honoured amongst all the deathless gods, and the son of Cronos makes her a nurse of the young, who after that day saw with their eyes the light of all-seeing dawn. So from the beginning she is a nurse of the young, and these are her honours. That is an extremely wide-ranging job description for a goddess, with many great attributions. So I think over the years, her remit has certainly shrunk. It's interesting to see how omnipresent she is and how important she is, and that she never actually made it into the pantheons of the Greeks and the Romans as one of their archetypal gods. If you think of Zeus and Apollo and Demeter and Persephone and Aphrodite and all of those gods, they're extremely archetypal. They're human templates of a form of being. They're quite one-dimensional. They're quite easy to slot into an envelope of understanding. But Hecate never quite fits there. Why doesn't she fit there? Is it because she has a different origin? Some people say she was Anatolian. That's That's from beyond Troy and Greece, modern day Turkey. Maybe that's how she went in. But she's strange, she's different, she's everywhere, she's omnipresent, she's omnipotent, and yet she is liminal. She is not one easy archetype. She's a liminal goddess standing at the crossroads of the places, even then with those elder gods. And it's interesting to see that over the years she was never ever forgotten. She crops up from the Chaldean oracles through to Shakespeare. In Shakespeare, she is the witch that declares the future of Macbeth. She has the final word, the final say. She knows. We don't know whether it's actually a warning or she's saying what will happen, but she says it. And she still appears in children's telly. She's everywhere, Hecate. Never ever been lost over the millennia. But over the millennia, she's had many associations. She's grown a number of different associations through different times, and yet the ones that come back time and time again seem to be ghosts, the dead, sorcery, magic, poisons, etc. These are what she's ended up with. These are where she now stands as an archetype in many ways and in her power. Such is her scariness that you see classical texts talking about the offerings that were made to her, slaughtering a black sheep and spewing its blood, slaughtering a black bull with a wreath of yew. This was appropriation, an offering out of fear in some ways, but also an offering to a chthonic earth mother, the dark, devouring earth mother. And that is the aspect that seems to have remained true over all these years. If she stands at the crossroads between life and death, if she's the keeper of the keys, the holder of the torches, it is no wonder that she would hold such power and such sway for so many millennia. For what do we fear most but death, if not our own, but of our loved ones? Who do we want to propitiate? Who do we want to ensure safe passage? And yet she's not like Hades or Pluto. Hades, a brother of Zeus. She's still very ephemeral and liminal. And what creatures get associated with her over the years? Frogs, those of two worlds. Dogs, the guardian at the gateway. Also, sometimes horses, snakes, boars, serpents. Serpents are quite obvious. They've always been chthonic. They've always been able to bestow healing and death. It's why the staff of Asclepius, the healer, had the serpents winding round it, and it is thought that possibly the healers of those times were able to distill certain medicines from venom. Maybe she stands there also somewhat oracular, but there were oracles, the famous oracles at Delphi, for example. So Hecate remains extremely liminal, extremely out there on the edge, dark, scary, mistress of poisons, mistress of the times in between. The yew is sacred to her, which again has its poisons, which arrows and darts were made from, and which has so much mythology in so many societies about being the gateway between life and death. So who is this goddess? If we look at her, what does she signify? Well, she very easily does signify a witch. You can see why Hecate would become the key witch's goddess over the years, why Shakespeare's witches, one would be named Macbeth, why today we have many things like Hecate's cauldron, Hecate rising, Hecate this and that. She has all the attributes are often given to witches, no matter which witch you are, no matter which witch you see, whether it is a diviner that is being castigated in the Bible and called illegal, whether it is a lady standing at the crossroads, whether it is a poisoner or somebody that helps in childbirth or helps with divination, that is the territory of the witch. So it is no wonder that she has come to be the witch's goddess. But how do we see her in contemporary witchcraft? We've adopted all that. We've adopted that. We have taken her back and we invoke her. But at what level do we invoke her? I have not worked with Hecate as much as probably half the people in this room. I've been a witch for many years, and in my tradition, when people come to initiation, the chant goes out as they're coming to the edge of the circle: Hecate, Ceridwen, Dark Mother, take them in. Hecate, Ceridwen, let them be reborn. She's constantly invoked, glory, glory, Hecate, goddess of dark ecstasy. She's often invoked at Halloween. She's always there. She's there in the words that are stolen from Dion Fortune and used again and again. But it's easy not to work with her, and it's easy to actually pigeonhole her as the dark crone on the end of a very neat triple goddess invented by Robert Graves. And yet that triple aspect of Hecate was there in some ancient images as well. And the idea of the metamorphosis and the idea of her holding different keys, the chords, the flaming torches that show the way. So it's interesting to see how contemporary witches have used Hecate. What I've discovered over the years with contemporary witchcraft and people claiming a goddess or being claimed by a goddess, it tends to be a particularly feminine thing. It's not something I can talk about for the guys, but a woman will be taken by a goddess, literally taken by that goddess, or literally come to that goddess for various reasons and totally identify with her. Carrie described having Hecate's birthday and honouring her for 20 years at the exclusion of her own birthday party. My birthday's the 18th of December, so anyone who knows the Celtic Epona will know that her feast day is also the 18th of December. So my very first witch name was Epona. It was a comfortable step, and I've never stopped working with horses all my life. At another stage, Sekhmet called me. I didn't intend her to, but she did, and it was when I was actually very broken after a car crash, and I later found out that some people thought she was the patron goddess of Egyptian bone setters, and if you think that she's the power of the sun in Egypt, that's going to make a lot of vitamin D. So goddesses call people, but Hecate had not actually called uniquely to me, and in a way I was scared of Hecate because with her associations with death and darkness, I always feared to go there and just tip something over the balance. I was happy to walk into the dark, but I didn't want to go so far there, but more on that later. Hecate is interesting as an image of the witch's goddess, as an image of the witch. In some ways, she's purer and easier to understand than a figure like Lilith. Lilith is another reclaimed aspect of ancient iconography, but Lilith has come to symbolize all that is sexual and dark in a woman that has been repressed and thrown away in the early Abrahamic faiths. Lilith was the first wife of Adam and rejected lying underneath Adam and went out and then became reviled as a demon. Many women over the years, feminists included, have called upon Lilith. But Hecate doesn't have that kind of easily understood aspect as a rejected goddess that we also call upon. She still stays quite difficult to understand in that way. So psychologically, what can Hecate mean to us? If we see her as an aspect like that, as a modern day archetype that we use to understand the world around us, that we use to understand ourselves, she can have a potent power of being a woman that is not, sexuality has no reference to it. She's not maiden mother crone, she's not Lilith, she's not an aspected archetypal goddess. She's something different. She is almost a pure glyph of magical power, feminine magical power. And that alone. She's also there standing at the crossroads as the birth and death giver, which has immense power for a woman. And obviously a man can also worship Hecate, but what I have seen in the witchcraft environment is more often, but not always, women working with that energy. Although people have talked to me about how Hecate has come to them at times of great personal grief, unexpectedly, and her light has shone the way. And Adrian Harris, who started eco movement Dragon, he actually had that experience and became a devotee of Hecate. Sociologically, can we place Hecate anywhere in modern society? Well, I think we actually can when we look at the revival of magical and pagan religion ongoing today. It's really interesting reading sociology and seeing how religion was believed to be dying out completely. There was the secularization thesis, and some of the great sociologists of the day said that religion was going to go away completely. So Freud said religion was the universal neurosis. Just as people have funny little rituals they do to make themselves safe, they did these funny little rituals to make themselves feel better. And once he had educated everybody, this would not be necessary. Marx, of course, called it the opium of the people, the universal cure for the poor underdog that did religion like doing drugs, and once they were liberated and educated, they would no longer need religion. And Weber said that it was just mystification and enchantment. And once we all got educated with science, we'd all drop this nonsense. And this sociological theory is what held sway until fairly recently. And what always tickles me is that Freud, Marx, and Weber were making these pronouncements at the same time as the Golden Dawn, and everybody else that Ronald Hutton has written about was reviving magical religion with oomph in the same city, in London, most of the time. So it doesn't always pay to listen to the main key theory of the moment, because something else might be going on. But if we see the rebirth of magical religion, perhaps we see some of the shackles of the fear of Abrahamic religion dropping away, some of the shackles of the fear of woman dropping away. We see society changing with the 2 world wars. We see the place of women changing, and we actually see religion freed to become all those things that in the 50s and 60s were thought to be cults and new religious movement and ever so deviant, to the extent that there was a whole brainwashing meme going on, and people were sending deprogrammers to kidnap their children back. And it was actually the modern day sociologists of religion like Eileen Barker, who runs Inform, that put a stop to this with their own research that they had done that proved that many new religious movements, including in many ways what we all practice today, were not harmful and were expression of contemporary religiosity that fitted better with contemporary ethics and ideals than some of the religions that were dying out. And there is actually still a lobbying for those older religions to maintain their status in society that can get pretty nasty. If any of you will remember the satanic ritual abuse controversy of the late 80s, you might remember watching the news and seeing that hundreds of children were being taken away from their parents. Their parents were being accused of interfering with them for satanic reasons. And all this came from fundamentalist Christian people influencing social workers that actually believed it. And it eventually fell apart. And again, it was Jean Lafontaine at the London School of Economics who wrote the definitive report. So it's interesting to see that some of these anti-witchcraft type factions are there. And I did some research, ridiculously enough, on horse maiming, because of that Epona aspect. And I found that behind all the myths and legends we have today of people slashing horses are the same fundy people that started the satanic ritual abuse controversy. So it shows how powerful some of these ideas and ideologies can be, but it shows how we can sit here today in Glastonbury, probably one of the wackiest centres of Britain, and do our thing. And we can adore and worship Hecate. 400 years ago, I don't think we would have been doing this, and maybe even 40 years ago, it wouldn't have been as easy. I certainly would not have been on the internet with my particulars up in doing so. So it's interesting to see Hecate coming out into the open and to think of what she offers us in society as well as individually. I think today you've heard a lot of stories about people's individual journeys with Hecate, and you can see what a powerful teacher she is, the Dark Mother, in many ways. So where does it bring us, returning Hecate into the light from the darkness? Where does it bring us indeed? Well, it's interesting. I did write a chapter for Sarita once. She occasionally asked me. So I did something on the Dark Mother, the other, and the idea that the darkness and the feminine have been put away while these younger religions, I might have turned that off, but you've seen all the pictures, while these younger religions carried on, and saying how our witchcraft and our adoration of such goddesses brings us into balance. It brings us into balance to look at the dark that might be shoved aside, to look at our fears, to just not try and look for one candle flame, but to acknowledge that we are part of the darkness and the light of both sides of the yin and the yang. And some of the French feminist writers have considered this quite strongly, and it's very interesting to hear what Luce Irigaray, who's a huge figure in French feminism, says about absorbing the other. And she says, "He who risks life risks himself, and who goes not into the abyss," it's funny French, sorry, but anyway, "and who goes not into the abyss can only repeat and restate paths already opened up that erase the traces of gods who have fled. Alone, always alone, the poet runs the risks of venturing outside the world and of folding back its ripeness to touch the bottom of the bottomless, saying yes to what calls him beyond the horizon. In this abandonment, one breath at most is left to him, first and last energy that is forgotten when he's not short of it, present everywhere but invisible, granting life to all and to everything on pain of death, expiring in the other so as to be reborn more fully, more of both, leaving the already consecrated temple to find traces of the filial bond with the holy other. The sense awakens. They boldly go forward, and sometimes a song comes to their lips. In this opacity, in this night of the world, they discover traces of gods who have fled, and at the very moment when they have given up their salvation, their radiance comes upon them." I think that is a magnificent description, actually, of standing before Hecate, coming from a French feminist writer who isn't actually talking about witchcraft at all. So that's the academic side of the talk, and I've lost the PowerPoint. Now for a little personal chat. As I said, I was actually quite concerned when working with Hecate, but my husband and I do enjoy creating ritual and doing open ritual of all forms, and particularly using different styles of magic to try to engage in that great spiritual aha moment for people from different paths in an open environment. And we've worked with everything from OTO to fire walking in every way. And I did a OTO ritual for the London Pagan Federation one year, and Adrian Bryn Evans liked it so much, saying he wanted me to repeat my Golden Dawn ritual at an event he was doing at Wookey Hole Caves. And I thought this was a bit strange to do a Golden Dawn ritual in a Wookey Hole cave at Halloween, and I did suggest to him that I would prefer to keep going with the kind of what would be appropriate, and could we actually do an invocation of Hecate if I was going to get the pleasure of working in Wookey Hole caves. And I promised him I would keep what he called the Golden Dawn aspects, which were actually really just the circle opening done with a group of people and able to look quite funky. And so he agreed. And I think it was called a witchcraft assembly or symposium or whatever. So I trotted off down there with my new coven, because we'd moved from Cumbria, leaving my long in the tooth ones in London. We'd moved to Cumbria and we had some newbies, and enlisted a few friends who happened to be speaking there. And I was shown the cave, and it absolutely blew my mind when I saw the Wookey Hole cave. And I can actually tell everybody to talk to the people at Wookey Hole if you want a really fab ritual in those caves, because I believe they are hireable. But anyway, more of that later. Once I had actually agreed that I would do this, I thought, well, that's a bit scary. What on earth am I going to do? So being a very proud Wiccan in that we are magpies, chaotic magpies, I just grabbed the first goddess book off the shelf and wrote the first invocation I could that seemed vaguely appropriate, including frogs and dogs and owls and whatever. I thought, well, they've all been associated somewhere. and got into this. And when I started writing it, a thunderstorm broke overhead, and it was a really funky thunderstorm. It was fabulous. And it was so bad that the river was running down outside my house, where there's normally just a rather bad road. And so I went out to look, because it was if it ever did that, it flooded my cellar. So I went out to have a look, and it was the biggest river we'd had that decade. It was flooding my cellar. But what astonished me was to look up to the crossroads above my house and to see that the actual rivers were running that way, and that way. And I had an aha moment about Hecate, because I could never understand how she could be the goddess of the crossroad and the goddess of the three via, the three ways. You've either got a 3 or a 4. I couldn't understand how she could be both. But if that crossroads is flowing like that, then you have them both. I thought, this is good. I've had a sign. I'm happy to continue with this ritual. And so I did, and we cobbled it together, and we went down with our team of newbies, and luckily met some really experienced friends that could just have a laugh and do everything brilliantly. And we were shown around these caves at Wookey Hole, and we knew everybody was going to have a really good time, because it was so fabulous with lights and gel lights and bridges and all sorts of things. But when you got to the very bottom cave, it was a cave that had been hollowed out by pebbles in whirlpools when it flooded. So I had another link back there. Luckily it wasn't flooded now. But on lower levels, there were caves there that had bones of Bronze Age burials that are normally hidden from sight by the lake in this cave. So we knew there were Bronze Age burials in a submerged cave, and there was this amazing low cave there, and it was quite a sort of blood red colour. And I thought, this is going to be fantastic. Now I'm really getting quite scared about what's going to happen, but we'll get on with the ritual. And it was actually the formula I use for everything, which is just an opening of various sorts and an invocation of the goddess, who everybody thinks really, really scary, black cloak on and everything. And then eventually the cloak comes off and she's got a corn crown and she's very nice. But what we were doing was, my husband has a bit of a fire obsession. He'd got these amazing flaming fire torches, of course, that everybody was waving around with great gusto, about 6 of them, flailing these things around, which really made Adrian Bryn Evans very happy. So we had the torches and we did the ritual. But as happens in such things, when doing the ritual, the charge that I had written left me completely, because Hecate came unto me and spoke her own charge, and also spoke with the voice that Carrie speaks of. And so you know at that point that you are completely taken over, even though you're doing a ritual for beginners, whoever's there, but you're doing it in a safe structure that they should be okay. And they'd all paid their penny going over. We brought all sorts of classical influences. They were all going to be all right, and they were all going to get an ear of corn. We brought in the Eleusinian mysteries. We brought the lot, really. They were going to be fine. But what I found was that when I was giving the charge, extra lines came, and I hope I have it here, just some of the ritual wordings, because it's quite nice. So I won't do the whole ritual, but where we started, you're probably all very familiar with the Dion Fortune words. I do love them. We use them as an opening invocation, but you have Hecate appearing in that. Lead us to the wellhead of memory, the wellhead where the pale white cypress grows, by secret twilight paths that no man knows, the shadowy path divided into 3, Diana of the ways and Hecate, and so forth. The first invocation was this simple one. O thou Hecate, mistress of the moon, I do invoke thee. Thou, lady of midnight, Hecate, Hecate, Hect, thy very name is magic. We call unto thee, hear us, hear our devotion, by the bat whose wings draw forth the veil of night, by the toad whose venom brings the second sight, by the dog who hails the others with his bark, by the cat who prowls, the mistress of the dark, by the owl who swoops in silent nocturne flight, and by the serpent whose shed skin is the symbol of new life. Thee I invoke, and it continues. O thou Hecate, whose face is hidden from the profane, I do invoke thee. Thou guardian of the 3 ways, Hecate, Hecate, Hekau, thine is the scourge and thine the kiss, thine the dark unspoken bliss, we call unto thee. Hear us, hear our devotion, thou giver of death, thou the comforter, thou bringer of new life, thou who standest beyond the veil of silence. I invoke thee, thou who speaks the mother's word of power, I invoke thee. And it went on. And on, until eventually the moment when Hecate arrived and I no longer was, and the charge came as, I stand at the crossroads, the meeting of the ways, where the past, the present, and the future run as tributaries to the river's head, at which I preside, the trivia, the meeting place whence run the rivers of life, rivers of semen, rivers of blood, and of bone turned to dust, that course down to meet the sea, the bitter, black, but fertile sea that ebbs and flows under the stars of eternity. My face is hidden and feared by men, but my name never lost throughout the aeons, for I am the mother of magic. I preside over the cauldron of creation and cut the thread that holds the spirit to the husk. I bear the knife that cuts the tie, the scourge that wakes the life, and the flame that lights the way. Fear me, for I am death, eternal, unchanging, yet always bringing change, and know that I have your name upon my lips. And here I wait, here on the shores of eternity, where I will wait for you, as I waited for your forefathers, as I will wait for your children, and as I will wait for their children after them. So know me, for when we meet, I will embrace you tenderly and with love, and you will have my name upon your lips. So that's what came out in that moment, and I quite like it. I've stayed using it as a charge. And I found that after that ritual, I became obsessed with bats for a while. So obsessed, I nearly decided I'd have a bat sanctuary. But luckily, my husband said, give it 3 months, please. We did give the monies we collected crossing the river to a bat sanctuary. And my black collie dog bitch died shortly after. So I do sometimes fear magic. She was only 5. It was a freak accident. And I do think maybe she's running there with Hecate. And as I drove back from that ritual, nobody in my coven wanted to come back to Wookey Caves, but I was gone. I had not been collected, nor had I even collected my moon crown. This is the problem with running a coven and running an open ritual. Everybody was so blown away that they never look after the priestess. My husband's okay, but I've just had a repeat of it in Krakow, having invoked Babylon, where I was left to sleep outside a pub while he set himself on fire with absinthe. As you do. But in this case, I had a whole coven of ladies with me, and they all refused point blank to go back with the tourists. They said it was so fabulous. We're not going back with those tourists. That was our night. It stays forever. Rufus said, well, if you really have to, I'll go back with you. So in the end, I didn't. And it turned out that when I'd been in a dark cloak with a moon crown, then I'd hidden it behind the stone down at this underwater lake. Nobody even picked it up. And it's my last moon crown. I've had millions since, but none of them fit or work. They all fall off. So Hecate has my moon crown. And one day I will go back to Wookey Caves and I will touch the wall, because that night all I dreamed of was the wall in Wookey Caves, and it was red like the womb. And it was very nice to be in the Chalice Well today and to see that as the little river runs away down and out to the more normal area, it looks like dragon scales. It looks like a lake as it trickles, and it's the same sort of colours as I was seeing. And when we got back to Wookey Hole, all the people that had enjoyed the ritual had eaten all the food. And I had a rather arrogant new priestess, and she said, but you're the high priestess, you should be honoured. I said, welcome to the world of a high priestess, Judy. And she didn't last, it has to be said. So when I did get home, I stopped off at Spa to get some bread, because that's how it goes. And went around the corner, and there's a second-hand shop, and there in the window of the second-hand shop was a great big key like that. And I thought, yes. So it's a bit of a ramble, but that's my ramble for the day. If anybody would like to comment and actually add their knowledge and wisdom to what I have rambled with, please do. Thank you.